Welcome to Culture Snap. I'm Keeva Stratton, and in this, our very last episode for Season 1, I sit down with a truly special guest. He's a legend of Oz rock, most well known as the guitarist for Hunters and Collectors, but Baz Palmer has also become one of our country's great innovators, playing key roles in founding companies such as Vamper, which began as a kind of Tinder for bands, and Wayo, which is a children's entertainment and educational app that's helped create exciting new augmented experiences for everyone from the Wiggles to Sesame Street. This is an interview that starts as a story about a rock and roll journey, but ventures into deeper insights on how to take a creative career and evolve it into many fascinating businesses. I hope you enjoy. Baz Palmer, welcome to Culture Snap.
Keeva, great to be here.
I am, excited to have you because I think there is so much more to your career that people would even probably just scratch the surface to know you. I was reading just the reams and reams and reams of things that you've done. And the most surprising thing to me was that you trained to be a teacher, Baz.
I was a teacher back in the day. Yeah, it's one of the things that I had great aspirations for when I was a kid. And then I found the wonderful majesty of rock and roll. And at the same time, I kind of thought, this is the old days, folks. This is like the steam engine. So I kind of thought it'd be really good to have a backup, job in case the whole music thing failed. As it turned out, it didn't fail. It actually worked out quite well. So I got to say, when I was doing my student rounds, I decided on 1 minute into my very first class that this was not my calling. I can tell you now, I was not cut out to be a teacher. I was the person who wanted to actually sit in the back of the room and make all the racket, not the one up the front telling everybody to stop making the racket. The twain shall never meet, I promise you.
That's why it was so interesting to me, because when you think of rock and roll and you think of, you left school at 15, you wanted to pursue, the rock dream. I just find the teacher thing is like this. Did you just have one of those moments of panic and you went, I need to have like an adult career?
That's it. That was it. Simply is. I mean, the idea, anybody who's a realist about music and, the fact you can make a living from that, the odds are pretty impossible. And also, I was living in the artist garret at the time in terms of philosophically, and I really believed in the idea that I didn't want to compromise my art. It's the grand ambitions that I had as a young artist that, no, truly though, I thought, well, I can kind of remain true to playing what I really want to play if I've got a gig on the side that pays the bills, because, I had a really fortunate kind of, growing up in music. I had a couple of fantastic mentors, a guy called Mick Geyer, who ran PBS, and you'll see his name mentioned by 1,000 musicians from my era. And, so I had this kind of, I just knew a lot about music because I got played everything. I was like, if you talk about a genre, I was all over it. I was listening to Sabbath with my mates, Purple with my mates, and I was listening to John Coltrane with Mick. And everything in between. And so, I just had this idea that if I was going to be a musician, I was going to do it on my own terms. And my favorite guitarists weren't the mainstream. They were the, Robert Quines of this world, Mark Ribot, people like that.
A little secret about me. My dog's name is Thelonious Chunk, named after Thelonious Monk.
Is the chunk real? Is it obviously this physicality thing, or you just wanted something to rhyme with monk? Which one is it here, Keeva? What is it?
He's not a slender dog. I'm not going to fat shame my dog, but he's a chow chow, so he's known for his volume.
Well, there you go.
I want to take you back a little bit to the first time you picked up a guitar. What drew you to a guitar in particular?
Well, so people talk about, the way they listen to music. And honestly, when I first started listening to music, and this sounds like nonsense, but I didn't listen to music. Music was a whole body thing for me. I kind of smelt it, tasted it, could see it. And so when, there wasn't a specific time, all of a sudden music was just this amazing, magical thing. I just had I just had to be able to play it. And when I started playing guitar, it was it was this uncontrollable thing. I didn't even know what to do with it. And I quickly learned that everybody else around me was better at it than I was, which was very disconcerting. But I had a kind of, maybe, it's your family background, but I had this kind of work ethic. Well, not so much a work ethic. I just had this belief that if I stayed at it, I'd get good at it. The terrible optimist, delusional one that I am. But also I was a really good, it was like a magpie. I'd grab something from your nest and make my own, and I was constantly just watching my mates and nicking off all their riffs. And so it was that certainly wasn't a commercial choice. It was just something I fell in love with. I was surrounded by my uncles who were just crazy, crazy Beatles fans. I mean, they would just play the whole catalogue all day. From the time they'd wake up to the time we went to bed, and they stayed at our parents' house all the time. So I was just immersed in this stuff. And then, as I said, I had my good friend Mick Guy throwing stuff at me left, right, and centre. And most of the people I know, and obviously, I grew up surrounded by musicians, and that was how I spent my life. They all kind of had the same stories. None of them really sat down and kind of had a master plan. It was like, well, what's the instrument closest at hand? What do they teach you at school? Okay, looks like I'm playing trumpet. Jeremy Horn's case, the French horn, So I'm just glad I was next to a guitar. Nothing against French horn, Jeremy, if you're listening to this, just, I'd rather be a guitarist.
No, my brother played the trumpet at school, and I really wish he'd play the guitar. If you can't play the trumpet, that is a miserable instrument to be around.
Yeah, the guitar's great for portability. I mean, if a kid asked me what instrument should they learn, I'd actually say piano. I just think piano because it's laid out beautifully, and I think people who start playing piano really early, they develop their musical ear really well. Like just chords have shapes and chords have sounds, and I don't know if you play. So guitar's got its own kind of internal problems in terms of like you play in boxes. And one of the things you shouldn't do is play in a box. You should be trying to think freely, with your instrument. I think guitars, piano's better. So there you go, kids. If you listen to this, go learn piano. They should get portable ones now. I remember when I was back in the 1880s when I was learning, it was like pianos were big. They were these big acoustic things. There was no such thing as electronic.
I did read that you had quite the work ethic, though, and you've mentioned it a bit there. You were kind of taking guitar almost like a full-time job. You had this kind of 8 hours a day. Is that correct?
Yeah, it's true. Okay, so I worked for my dad. I quit school, year 11. I was just doing nothing for me. And so I went and worked for my dad's factory. I was put in another office, and I started playing guitar a bit too much. And in the end, I finally got sacked by my own father. I'd been reduced to one job, getting the workers' lunches. And that day he came in about 3:00 and all the workers were starving. And he said, that's enough. That's it. It's like, I just can't have you here anymore. Go home. And he knew, I was passionate about it, and he knew I was truly dedicated to it. So he did what very few parents would ever do. He said, I'll pay you the same amount of money to stay home and play guitar. So I was very, very lucky. So as a kid, I said, but my mum was at home too. And he said, your mum's going to tell me how much you practice. If you don't practice more than you're practicing now, which is basically the whole working day, then I'll stop paying you. So I had good fortune of staying at home for 6 months and playing guitar and getting paid for it by my dad. Then that's when I went back to university after that. And so I went back and did year 12 and then university and blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Incredible.
So I did have I just loved it. As I said, there wasn't a tiresome thing. I didn't have to get up and, make myself play guitar. The problem was actually stopping myself from playing guitar. I know, I had a guitar in my hand all the time, and I used to probably drive everybody else around me absolutely bonkers because I'll be talking to you in, chords.
Incredible. But it just goes to show what supportive parents can do in terms of, nurturing.
Man, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. And at the same time, they weren't indulgent with me. They would sound incredibly indulgent to actually allow me to play guitar and be paid for it. But, it wasn't, as I said, I had to, do the woodshedding. Otherwise I would be no longer paid. And, my parents, they were incredibly supportive. I mean, it was beyond just actually having me play guitar. But when I started playing gigs, they would drive to Melbourne with me, pick up the PA. Because it was all DIY, the idea of playing a gig in Sunbury when you're a 16-year-old kid, this is where I grew up. That wasn't going to happen. So you put on your own shows at the local town hall, and we'd go play, we'd play country fairs. We'd be the ones set up behind the little haystack, rocking away, people throwing stuff, whatever. But my parents just did absolutely everything. They were the roadies, they were the management, they were everything. For when you're living in the country, that's a really fortunate thing because you just don't have the access.
Yeah. No,
Lucky
it's incredible. And it's amazing when I talk to successful sports stars, when I talk to successful artists, they all have that similar, their parents were there at the start, doing the hard yards, keeping the support going, keeping you positive when you are playing the country fair and saying, keep going, it'll get better, makes such a difference.
an objective, realistic look at what was happening with our amazing, career, our trajectory when we were playing these country fairs. Any sensible parent, if they turned around and said to you, look, don't give up your any job, forget about your day job, just like stop now, that would have been a very sensible thing to do. But, fortunately they didn't.
So you kind of formed this indie group, Harem Scarum, and that was like quite a
No,
popular...
Harem
No.
Scarum was, no, there's a whole different trajectory. I played for 5 years in a band called the Soul Twisters, and we were like this kind of R&B band. When I say R&B, I'm not talking about modern R&B. I'm talking about, Chuck Berry, etc. It was that combination of Chuck Berry type, the classics like Route 66, and then we would write originals. So it's very much the JoJo Zepp and the Falcons model. If anybody knows them, we are playing these kind of great, fantastic classics, everything through from, as I said, Chuck Berry through to Ray Charles, and then you're throwing in originals. And then in this band was a guy called Chris Wilson, the Crown of Thorns harmonica player. And Chris and I, we did our Ryan, my brother Craig, and we spent years together just kind of honing our skills. We'd play like 5 nights a week, 52 weeks a year. So we would, and we just played, and we basically played all these just sold out shows. Every night we'd drive from Welshpool to who knows where, and just play. And so that was my apprenticeship. And, those crowds were, they were there to drink primarily. And you were the entertainment. And if you didn't entertain, they'd let you know about it. So you had to kind of run this, this kind of walk the tight wire of, if you're going to play original songs, which that was my main interest. Those songs had to be really good. They had to stand up against some of the classics of rock and roll. So then Chris Wilson and I were in that band. And there's another fantastic band in Melbourne called Harem Scarum. And we were getting to the end of the days of Soul Twisters, and Chris was going along and jamming with Harem Scarum. Chris was jamming with a whole lot of people at the time. And so they needed a guitarist, Harem Scarum. So I went and tried out. I got the gig. And in Harem Scarum was myself, Chris Wilson, and Peter Jones. And so from that band, Peter Jones goes on to join Crowded House. I go on to join Hudson Collectors. Chris goes on to join Paul Kelly. So, it was, wow, what a fertile ground of, creativity that was that band. And the band in its own right was absolutely stupendous. Still one of my great musical experiences of my life. The Marshall Brothers, incredible. So then from there, that was the kind of Melbourne inner city where I really started playing a very different kind of show. And again, the thing about that band is you had to know your music really, really well. You had to know your Tony Joe White and Sly and the Family Stone. You couldn't enter a band like that without having this incredible knowledge of certain kinds of music and an adaptability to be able to play something and jam on top of that. And then from that, John Archer, the bass player from Hudson Collectors, he produced the Harem Scarum album, Pilgrim's Progress. And when it came time to one day I got a call from, I think it was John. John said, "Hey, we need some slide guitar on some Hunters stuff. Would you come down and play a bit of slide guitar?"
Amazing.
So I played some slide guitar, and then I played some more slide guitar, thinking like, this is starting to turn into a Raikuda album, the Allman Brothers. It turned out that was my audition of sorts, really. Any good band, it's about how you get along and, how you, what are your relationships like? How do you jam on stuff? And so it was a really nice way to audition instead of kind of waiting at the door and having your 5 minutes to go and try to, impress. So, and thus began the long journey of Hudson Collectors. And here we are, we played our last tour, finished off the Red Hot Summer Tour, the second incarnation after COVID 2 years back. And so that brings my tally. I joined when I was just about to turn 29. And finished 2 years ago. So what's that, 66 now, 64. Wow, that's a long time I was in that band. We still are in that band.
Tell me a little bit about creative chemistry, because you've mentioned there just how special those Harem Scarum years were because of that creative chemistry and partnership. How do you identify it? How do you know when it's time to move on? What's some of the kind of feel of that? Because it's probably a little similar to what I do in terms of creative work with like a art director. You can have magic for a while, and then you do need change to build upon your art, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I mean, one of the things that I mean, the artistic process, I mean, you'd love to think it's all happy days and, rosy sunshine, but of course it's not, and part of the things, the people I've worked best with are ones people where there's really obvious creative tension too, because people are they're kind of like-minded in terms of their ambition, but they're also very single-minded in terms of what they think that ambition should, how to reach that ambition or how, about their own art. So anybody that I've worked with that I've really respected to get to where we want to get to, compromise is the wrong word, because compromise sounds like you're kind of making a lame version of something. I think it'd be more like going at it hammer and tongue until you just, so some parts of the edifice of each other crumble off and you just find some common bond and a way of doing things. And so I always loved that. And I, for better or worse, I've always been a real perfectionist about things too, and sometimes to my own detriment. I've worked with people that I really, really admired, and we didn't click, and I won't go into names here. We all know who we are because we're still good friends. Either I made them nervous or they made me nervous, and we just couldn't get the best out of each other. Harem Scarum was like, when you talk about, this great group of people who really, had a great knowledge of music, had great musical skills. I remember when I played my very first show. It was supposed to be a half hour, 40-minute set. An hour and a half later, we're still on stage and we've only played half the songs. Thus was the crazy jamming ability of this band. Man, no one warned me. I just jumped on stage going, well, this is going to be a gig and I've learned all the songs and let's go and play them. Well, no, that's not how it worked. It's a baptism of fire in terms of jamming. But, at the same time, I walked off that stage exhilarated that very first time because everything I'd done up until then, there was always some room to kind of move around because I always, had a solos I could take and I could play around inside that particular 1632 bars or whatever it might be, 64. But, it still was it was a defined period of time and you took the solo on an arc and then you start, middle, end. But with, Scare 'em. And then later with Chris Wilson's Crown of Thorns, which we were running also in parallel at one point. The jam was, if you were telling a fantastic story with your playing, then they would roll you around for another 64 bars. Now, anybody who's kind of got an internal monologue going on about their solo and where they're going with it, they've already kind of mapped out the end. When you get to the end and you're like, you're up on fret 39 on the, no such thing as this, by the way, on the guitar, and then they say roll around again. Well, that's a really tough thing to do. So again, this is like another great skill set I learned, that there's never an end to a solo. It's just another beginning. The amount of fights I've had with musicians on stage, you would not fathom it. Like you're sitting there and you're looking at the audience, you're jamming away and there's smiles and there's this, then you turn your back on you. I'm going to have the knives around. And, I've had drumsticks thrown at me. I've been pushed in the back. I've had everything happen to me on stage. It's like World Championship Wrestling up there sometimes. And, you go off the show, after the show, people go, man, that was just such an intense gig. You guys are on fire. Yeah, we're on fire already. We're going to kill each other up there. Yes.
It's the passion, isn't it?
That is the passion. When you're up there and you're, playing live, I mean, you really are responding to things in real time. And it's a very different scenario than nearly any other work you do. I mean, when we're having a conversation, we're doing this in real time. But once you sit down at the keyboard with your sketch pad or whatever, there's a chance to revise, and there's a chance to change your mind, and there's a chance to actually rethink that stupid thing you were going to say or whatever. So, and live music's just not like that. I think that was the part I just loved the most. Like just being right on the edge of your capacity, of your abilities, and the idea that, you never forget there's an audience in front of you, and audience, I mean, I don't know if the audience is aware of that, but they're dictating the tempo. They're dictating the intensity. It's coming off them, and if they're dull, I mean, you can do anything you want, and it's just dull, unfortunately. I've played shows where we walk out and we're on fire, and they're out there just eating cupcakes and drinking tea.
I love that you raised the kind of creative tension, because I think that that's kind of one of the key ingredients of creativity is having that tension, but also having the trust, right? You have to have that foundational trust in one another, whether you're getting along or not, or whether there's fire.
Yeah.
I think the trust that you're going to deliver and be able to meet the level that you need is that's where the sparks happen.
It is. That's so true, Keeva. Yeah.
I love also what you've said there about audience, because I mean, I spend a lot of time on stage, not in a rock capacity, but certainly, working to an audience. And some audiences are hard work.
Oh, you walk out there. and you start talking, and you can actually feel yourself bombing in real time. And you think,
Yes.
this is the same speech I used yesterday, which they were like, going, what's happening here? And like when you're in a band, there's like, especially the band the size of the Hunters, there's 7 of us up there on stage. I mean, you could be having a pretty tough night, and Buggerlug's over in the corners having the time of his life. So you kind of just, whatever. But then like you walk out there, there's a spotlight, there's 500 people, there's one microphone. Oh my God. I find public speaking is the most terrifying thing in the world. I'm not
I
the only
love it.
person that says that. See, there you go. I don't love it.
I love it because I have the microphone, which is my favorite thing in the world. And B, there's just something magical when you do get an audience that's riding along with you and having a laugh and, hitting the notes and
yeah.
So
I haven't. But how did you when you first started doing it though? Was it all from day one? Did you just like fish to water? Is that how it was for you?
No,
or?
no, I was a
No.
horrible, terrified public speaker to begin with.
Good. There's a future for me at my ripe old age of however a couple of 100 years old I am.
I had to get to, I don't know if there's just something about you get to a certain age in life and you realize no one actually cares. I think up until that point I'd been very self-conscious and thought, oh my goodness, is my hair out of place? What if I don't say the right thing? What if what if I'm not the smartest person in the room? But then all of a sudden I just thought, you know what? No one actually cares. They're giving me 10% of their attention at best because that's how we are as human beings. And no one's really sitting there going, who is that horrible person on stage? And, did she really think that blue suits her? No, and if they are, they've got other issues to deal with, right? Like I think the most freeing thing is to not care about other people's opinions.
Well, I look, I could definitely translate to my live performances because sometimes I'm kind of having out-of-body experiences, watch myself and go, Jesus, mate, you're a goose. Look at you. You'll do anything just for, to get in a response. We've got a song called Do You See What I See? And it used to start off 1, 2, 3, 4, all banged in. I don't know why, but I decided that, there's a good intro for this because it featured me. So instead of going like dun 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 with the whole band, but I went, no, look, I'll just take the start by myself. Bow, 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 and did the whole guitar thing. And on the last tour, we're doing it was the penultimate show, and it gets to the last chord, bow, 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 and I pick up the guitar and just go, and I got the strings wide open and a full volume. I just go bang, 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 bang on my head. Crowd went insane. It was fantastic, but Keeva, you saying to yourself, where's that? I mean, honestly, first of all, my first thought after I got off the thing is because you're in that kind of heightened state of reality, you don't really, all your physical stuff is exaggerated. I really banged my head really hard. It was really sore. And I thought, I could have knocked myself out. That would have... Imagine if I went, that would have probably got an even better response. But the other thing was, first of all, I couldn't knock myself out. And second of all, mate, why did you do that? Why did you even think of doing that? I don't know.
It's probably better not to analyse that behaviour.
No. Well, there you see, that's the thing about just getting up on stage and just loving being there. I absolutely revel in being on stage. It's up there. That's it. It's me. It's on stage with my family and my kids and my grandkids. That's it. It's been a while. There you go.
Well, there's one stage you've played on that, I've got to say I was watching intently that day. It was the 2013 AFL Grand Final. I'm a massive Hawthorn supporter. It thankfully worked out well for me that day. Do you have a team, Baz?
The Mighty Tigers. The Mighty Tigers. The Mighty Tigers.
The Tigers. Okay, we can.
No, we had a great run.
I don't know if you actually watched the game after your performance.
Yeah. It was a great game, actually. We did watch it. That was so much fun doing that. The logistics in that behind that, they're huge. What's happening behind the scenes. Anybody who thinks those bands will get stage plugged in and start playing, forget about it. That goes for days and days and days. And it was even an eye-opener for me. And I've played squillions of shows all around the world under all kinds of circumstances. But in terms of, the most amount of effort put into the shortest amount of time, because you're only up there for 15 minutes or 10, whatever it is.
Yeah,
Holy moly.
Quick.
No, but I loved it. We loved it.
And can you feel the crowd? I always wonder, to be in a centre of the MCG, 100,000 people on grand final day, they're there obviously for the football. It's probably one of those weird experiences where typically when you're playing, they're there for you. But, in this case, I would say at least 99,000 were there for the football.
Look, there's no one there for us. I mean, it's a very different situation. I mean, you're actually playing a really special show. It's a really special moment in your life. Look, first of all, just the sheer grandeur of the place, being in the ground and those stands. All I could think about was like, wow, what must it be like to be a footballer running around there with 50,000 of those people screaming for you and the other 50,000 wanting to kill you, but it's all co-joined volume. That would be intense because we just, like a band comes on stage, they do a little bit of a rev up, you get a few claps. It's not, you're really playing, and you've got to remind yourself of this, you're playing for the TV audience because they're the ones that've got the clarity. They haven't got the delay to deal with. They're only seeing you. They're not trying to order a pie, get a cold beer, tell the guy in front of them to sit down. They're just, you're on the screen. So you're very much a TV performance. But having said that, I mean, like I was in awe of the situation. I played as big audiences as that almost. I think we played a couple of festivals that were that size, huge, but they're just not that tall. It's 4 stands up. It's crazy, the height of that thing. And just to walk out in the MCG turf, that's like something else too. You kind of, it's hallowed ground. I mean, that's a bit of a cliche, but, I've been a footy fan since I was that big. And it's great. And, that's great to see all and the players I'm only small at the best of times. But you just forget how massive these players are. I mean, they are just, I don't know how tall your husband is, but like, I'm the tall one of me and Jody, and I'm 5'6", and these guys are 6'6" and upwards. And man, and also they've got all these other things. They call them muscles.
Yes.
And rock and roll, you're usually in the exact opposite state, unmuscled. Yeah.
Very different kind of sport. But it's interesting from a cultural perspective, though, because, Holy Grail has kind of been picked up really as an AFL anthem. And,
it has.
That wasn't something the band went out and tried to generate, but this is just, it's interesting for me how culture attaches onto certain songs. And I would say, and maybe it's controversial, but I would say as much as Up There Kazali or One Day in September, now Holy Grail has become a grand final day anthem.
Yeah, but I think there's something, archetypal in the story there. It is kind of, this big battle that's going on. It's good versus evil. This is how we put football in that same kind of dichotomy, the two opposing forces. And I think it translates so beautifully to football. I think so many lyrics don't stand up to be as being that special, and then some are great, some of them are fantastic poetry in their own right. Usually when you hear a lyric in a band, the first time you ever hear that lyric is with the melody attached to it. And so you get caught up in melody. I mean, if you I think even in the general populace, there are those people who can sing every word to every song. And then there's the other half of the world who can't even sing 5 words. They just only know when it comes to the chorus. They've got those 3, born in the USA. They've got those few words they know. Holy Grail. You can't really forget that. That's like a fantastic tag. It speaks to hope too. And I think that, if you go into football, you've got to have
you've got to have hope.
You've got to have hope. Otherwise, gee whiz. I mean, God, talk about disappointments. Holy moly. Sorry, there's my word of the day, obviously, holy moly. I don't even usually say that, but today's words.
I bring that out in you, Baz.
Thanks, Keeva. That's great.
I think this is the beautiful thing about any form of art, though, is that it can exist for a long time in one form, and then a whole new meaning can be applied to it. And it could evolve again. Like it could be that, in 20 or 30 years, that song captures a new generation in a different way for a different purpose.
I was like, do you see what I see now is the anthem for Australian cricket? Mm-hmm. And, but sometimes the interpretation is just so literal. So with that one, if you look at the ad, it's about, LBW and all the other things that happen with cricket. Did you see the snick of the ball? Did you see that? At the same time, the song was used, I'm pretty sure it's used for the Fred Hollows Institute Foundation too. And, even on a literal sense, just the actual words, those first words of the chorus, I mean, they've been used in 3 very different situations, but I think, to great effect. Ones to pull, they're all kind of pulling your heartstrings in different ways.
I think it's, I think sometimes about Thunderstruck and the Dallas Cowboys, right? And just how that song, has now got this whole, when I talk to Americans about Thunderstruck, they don't think AC/DC, they think Dallas Cowboys and cheerleaders. And,
absolutely. Absolutely.
It's crazy that that's become, for,
What was it? Remember when they introduced, the AFL had a shot at having cheerleader girls, remember back in the day? It was like Carlton and Sydney Swans. You remember that?
Yes.
That was a strange moment in Australian sport. didn't do well, and it's funny. In other parts of the world, it did do well and it still does well. I mean, that's what they do, our American sport. But like, what was the Bluebird song? Was it Rod Stewart? Do you think I'm sexy? I mean, was it really that?
Terrible.
Was it really that terrible?
But that's another interview with another person, I think, around kind of.
Yes, exactly,
where that's
absolutely.
gone. Well, before we leave football, though, I think probably one last question on that. Have you got any
Yeah, okay.
advice for Snoop Dogg for his grand final performance? Is there anything you'd say
I
about?
reckon they're going to absolutely love him. Honestly, he's just a man. Like, he's just the guy's lived on charisma his entire life. I'm not taking any away from his creativity, but he just goes, like, look at him in the startup world. Snoop just throws himself at something and gets involved, and everybody wants to support him. I just think maybe he's got I think maybe he's a really supportive character himself. Maybe he puts it's just all about getting it back in kind, I don't know a lot about Snoop. I know his songs, obviously. Drop It Like It's Hot, I still think is one of the greatest pieces of music ever written. Love that song. Man,
I love his Martha
good.
Stewart era. I think that partnership is just, it's just beautiful. I love it.
Snoop, man, Snoop doesn't have a beginning or an end. If someone said that, there's God, that's who God was, you go, yeah, maybe.
Maybe. It's a weird life we live.
Yeah.
So you've had this amazing, amazing music career, and I know that took you off to become a music producer, and you created your own label and supported other artists.
Yeah.
I'm kind of keen to dive into the tech career, Baz, because I find
that's
really...
a really good... There's a fantastic connection there. There was a company, my first foray into technology was a company called Sound Halo. And what that was is like, this was at a time when all of a sudden we're seeing piracy running rampant through the music industry and watching people's incomes disappear. And the one thing, having been a musician who performed live, I just knew there was one thing that was unassailable. And that was that being at a live gig and all the content around live music. And if it could be kept in real time, you were able to enjoy it just like a person at the gig. I just thought there'd be something that would find an audience and could be monetized in order to be able to support musicians. So we'd already had live, broadcasts, but live broadcasts are like $1 million affair. You bring in an OV van, the whole thing. You got to set up, you duplicate the cables on the ground, you duplicate the cameraman. I just thought, this is insane. Every large venue already has all the assets needed in-house. I mean, if you go to the tennis center or if you go to a concert, you've got the big screens. They're already filming it. And the people filming are the ones who see the band every single night. So they know how to switch them. The guitarist is going to do this. The singer's going to be over there, blah, blah, blah. The guy mixing it at the front of house, he's far enough away from the stage. He's pulling a real mix. He's pulling a mix that's actually where he's not really hearing the on-stage sound. So I thought, wow, all I need to do is grab the live feed from the cameras, grab the front of house mix, and I'm probably going to get some of the best sounding looking content. So what I need to do then is, okay, I thought, well, I don't want to make a live album that comes out in 6 months' time. What I want to be able to do is actually just distribute it like a live format, but make that instantly downloadable, and not in terms of a whole concert, but song by song. So, and this is my son, Declan, was really, part of the formative thinking about this fact. It was his original idea that I jumped on. And so we just started chasing that down to see if we could deliver a high res, like, 4K, or at least 1080 at the time. Sorry, it was 1080, but we're recording in 4K, 1080, and get that out to people so you could actually, your Facebook would light up. Pearl Jam is playing on the other side of the world. They just finished Better Man, bang, download it, and you've got the 4K version. You're watching it in real time. Okay, but you're not paying, you're not watching that. You're actually, it's yours to keep. Got to remember, this is pre-streaming. Streaming's just starting to have come out kind of, over there somewhere, but people were still very much into an ownership model of music. So I just thought that would be a really good idea. And we had massive amounts of interest. We were working really close with Telstra. We took that around the world and introduced it to a whole lot of people. And, our very first show was with Alt-J. We launched it with them. And then we launched with, Tom York's Atoms for Peace with Flea, and it worked just brilliantly. It was like beautiful, beautiful technology, and it delivered exactly what it was supposed to deliver: real time, multi-res video within 30 seconds of a song finished, fully mixed, fully broadcast quality, and for the price of 30 cents for a song or whatever it was going to be. The only thing I didn't count on, and I would admit some great people from the music industry. Simon Watt was the head; he was the CTO for Universal for the world at the time. I showed him that This has been my most memorable meeting of my life. I went to his offices, the first meeting I did in Los Angeles to show someone the technology. And he said, as you can imagine, Baz, he said, the greatest ideas in content walk through my door every day, but this is the greatest one I've seen. He said, but in 5 minutes' time, you're going to be walking in. I said, I know your next meeting. He said, you're going to meet the royalty people, as he called them, the bean counters. And he said, and you're about to have the worst meeting of your entire life. And I was like, well, you know, I don't know exactly what he meant, because 2 years later, I was still trying to strike a deal with Universal. They ultimately what I was doing is in the true sense of disruption, disrupting part of a whole economic chain and contractual, things around commerce of music. And so that's where the part that became the sticking point and the roadblock ultimately. So it was a real eye opener to the intricacies of the music industry. And I didn't probably understand the power of my disruption, how big it actually was. Because if I had, I think I would have gone for a larger lump of money. We were trying to raise capital, but what I really needed was I needed a 20 million, 30 million, 40, $50 million check. And if I'd been working at that scale and I'd been based purely out of the US, I could have made something incredible happen. I mean, we got to do amazing trial concert with Pearl Jam, which I'll put up as against any of the greatest live recordings ever. I mean, and you got to remember the cost of the concert, instead of the concert costing $1 million to put into your lounge room, into your telephone, your mobile devices to download, ours would cost about $5,000 to $8,000. So you got a whole different scale of economics there. So you can see the disruption here. Again, you were dismantling a whole industry. The thing about it is that I now give you the artist perspective. If you go and I've done live broadcast, I've done live recordings with the hundreds of collectors with camera. And when you go into your normal sound check for a really big show, you walk in at 4:00, you play for half an hour, you walk out, you just get your sound right, you have a bit of a jam with your fellow members, have a bit of fun, and then you leave. Well, that's not the way it works for live broadcast. You get there about midday and you sit around and you wait forever. And then you finally get to play, and then someone's talking through the guy with the headset. No, we need more light. We're not getting the right play. And everything's duplicated because they've got their own front of house guy getting the different sound for the broadcast van. They've got their camera switcher trying to talk to the other camera. I mean, it's just, so what becomes a process where usually the audience, you walk on, set your sound, go away, come back, you're just dealing with an audience. Now you've got this whole lot of logistical stuff you're dealing with, and your performance is affected by it. Thankfully, most people who do these live broadcasts do at least 2, 3, 4 nights in a row, because you've got to get over their first night, because it's just a pain. Everything's been disrupted. Your normal process of how you go on stage and all the things leading up to it, that's just not normal. So you come out and you're really conscious of the fact that there's other people you don't know. You got to remember, when we do a show, no one's been introduced. When we do Pearl Jam, there wasn't a single extra person on the floor for that show, So the Pearl Jam one is like, man, oh man. I mean, I would never bootleg because, I'm not a fellow muso. I wouldn't do it to him. But incredible. And the old Jay stuff, the guy lost his voice that night and he still pulled out an incredible performance because he felt an obligation for all the work we'd done to go out there and put on a show for us. But, no one who worked with us had to deal with another person or a disruption to their normal working day. So you can see the power of that.
And the energy, just the energy transfer to have it in that moment. Man. And
it's incredible, so we got, we made news all around the world with that. And that was my first understanding that sometimes you need a lot bigger check than you can possibly ever imagine. And in fact, everything I've done in technology has taught me that, And also the other thing is, if you're running way out in front of the pack, that mightn't be the best place to be. You might be getting yourself a pat in the back for your innovation. But I always remind myself there's about 25,000 brands of sneakers out there, and they're all selling the same shit. But, some of them just do it better, and they have better marketing budgets, and they have better creative and all the other kind of stuff. Innovation of it in itself doesn't mean anything. It means diddly squat.
No, I think the timing.
Look at the AI. Yeah, look at the AI thing with DeepSeek coming out. They just come out here and they do it for 1/1000th the price of bloody, OpenAI.
Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how so many founders fall into innovation because you've got a great idea, right? You've seen something and you think you can solve for this, but you probably haven't really thought through that this is actually, you are disrupting an industry that you're actually going to the people for whom probably don't want it disrupted the most. It's probably not in their interests yet.
That was my mistake, Keeva. You just nailed it. That was it. I
Yeah.
was actually going to the people who actually held the keys to the fortress, and they would, I was just like going to pass them over to me. What am I like, And then, the same thing, to a lesser extent, when I did, so that was my beginning in technology. So from there, like decided to go and, for some reason, stay in this particular crazy world of innovation. The next part of the journey was the fact that when we were doing these live concerts, this was at the rise of people bringing on their mobile devices and filming themselves watching the show. And we thought it would be a great antidote to that too, that, hey, you won't need to film the show. You'll be able to get it on your phone in real life. But of course, that ignores what's the motivation of people filming the show. It's actually to make themselves the center of gravity. The band's second fiddle now. It's about me at the band. I can show my friends. This is me elevating myself in terms of the social realm. So we thought we were kind of some kind of answer to that. Of course, we weren't, and we're never going to be. I've been to shows where the artists beg people to put down their phones. Instead of they walk off stage, if they don't put their phones down, it does make a scrap of difference. The audience is going to do what the audience is going to do. But anyway, so what I did see, though, was this thing of, the primacy of mobile phones and how they're going to take over the world, like in a way beyond anybody's imagination. Sorry, we were all seeing it, not like I wasn't anything special, but you kind of knew this was going to be how this is where you're going to converse. You're going to converse on this little mobile device. We're going to leave the TV behind. So there's a big, upswell in terms of apps, where people building all these apps because that was the home entertainment system all of a sudden. And, I was kind of already interested in like the whole world of augmented reality that was coming on board right now. And I just thought that that added that, again, that built on what I was trying to do with Sound Halo. It's the idea of connectivity. And in a way, not that Sound Halo broke the fourth wall, but you had a now relationship with the live artist you've never had before in your life. And I thought with augmented reality, we could actually superimpose another whole layer on where you actually enter the screen side by side, your favorite characters and whatever, and be part of the action. So from that came, me starting to muck around with augmented reality. And again, one of my kids said, the Wiggles would love this. Like it was such a curveball.
I wanted to know how we went from music. I mean, not that the Wiggles are not music, but it's a slightly different genre to your typical
That's right.
space.
Well,
so this is the moment.
This is the moment. And my daughter said that, the Wiggles would love this. And I was like, wow, because she was a kindergarten teacher. This is Hattie May, who we do now. Harriet was back then a kindergarten teacher. And she just said, the kids just love the Wiggles. And since you've made these masks, could we make some of the masks that the characters of the Wiggles have? And could we do a game where you start playing with the Wiggles? And, I had a relationship with the Wiggles because they were in the band, the Cockroaches back in the day, and my band, the Soul Twisters. Let's make the story return full circle to my first foray into music. And so it was really nice. And the guy called Basil Cook was running the whole that side of things up at ABC. And I knew Basil really well because he signed one of my artists once. So we just started a conversation, and they were, it's really interesting. They were looking for a kind of digital solution at the time themselves. And like most people in the space of kids' entertainment education, they're really fixated on the idea of providing something of value to kids. A lot of work goes into the Wiggles being the Wiggles. Don't ever underestimate their thinking. I mean, they've got they're all teachers. They came from a really good place when they started the Wiggles. And so their intention kind of met ours. How do we create valuable screen time for kids where the kids has agency, where the kids is like the protagonist and the kids proactive in the play? So there you go. That was how it happened. And, or because people filmed themselves with Prince with a mobile phone. And, and then we, Wiggles, we did the Wiggles, Sesame Street scene, what we did with the Wiggles. And they too were like, they'd had a great app called Elmo's Calls before that, where, Elmo spoke to the child. But, compared to what we were doing, like that's really simple technology. There is the impression that they're almost talking to you, but there's nothing like what we did with, the Wayo apps where you jump in and there's you on the screen and there's the Wiggle on the screen and you turn into a Wiggle. So Sesame just loved that idea, and then so too did the Oddbods people, which worked with these amazing big brands who do kids stuff, and that's how I found myself in that world.
Obviously, you got a bit of a taste of innovation. You kind of had that bug. So I understand you've created something which was more about the music industry and bringing artists together. Tell me a little bit about that.
Well, this is Vampire, and it leads me to say something about, all the conversations we've been having through this whole thing. I'm by and large a collaborator. Everything I do is about collaboration. And I'd kind of probably say that no matter how big someone's ego is and how much they claim to have done it all by themselves, they're usually standing on the shoulders of giants. And there's some wonderful person behind the scenes helping out with every single, aspect of what they're creating. So in the case of Vamper, I was already immersed in the technology world because of, the things I was doing with the Wiggles and Wayo and, Sound Halo. And in my label, there was a guy called Josh Simons, and Josh was in a band Buchanan that I'd signed. And Josh, a very smart cookie, he came to me with the idea for Vamper, and he said, we need to find a way to connect musicians, because what had happened is, he'd finished I'd closed down my label. I'd gone on to do all the other things with the Wiggles, etc., and my augmented reality stuff, right? And he'd gone off and, gone out to get himself a record deal elsewhere around the world. And, the old days that involves planes, trains, and automobiles. So off he goes to London, and, he gets all those pain points that everybody has always historically got, because, just trying to show your music to someone. But we've got to wind the clock back here and remember what it's like, 6, 7 years ago. And it just wasn't easy to show people what you did and to give those people easy access to it. So he wanted to find a way, first of all, to solve that pain point of how you could actually show labels your songs. But then he also came up with the idea of, well, why don't we just connect musicians at the most fundamental level? We've moved we've moved into the digital medium, and why are we still advertising for musicians, for people to jam with on old school formats like Craigslist and things like that? Because that's where the bulk of the ads were going in the US, and over here you had in all the kind of street papers looking for a bass player. Well, when you put that ad up and someone applies to it, to your ad, I mean, you can't hear what they play. You just go, you might see a photo, person looks cool, they kind of suit my tribe a little bit, but you can't just get click away and go, wow, there's 25 photos, there's 15 demos they've made, there's some live gigs they've played. So Josh had the idea of this one-stop shop for musos, and based on a really simple model, like, the Tinder model, so, binary, left, right, left, right, left, right, as a way to be able to run through, 20, 30, 40 people. Because, most of the time, you do this on a hunch. You kind of go, yeah, look at a photo and you go, yeah, that kind of looks like me. And then you go the next step, and maybe if they look like you and they look like they should belong in the same band, you go and listen to the music, and you go and look at their repertoire and where they've played and things like that. So it was about, seeing and, on a global scale, connecting people, because most musicians have the aspiration to move outside their neighborhood, be that Fitzroy, and why would you want to? But anyway, I mean, and musicians have this notion of traveling and getting out, and they'll go anywhere to find a good band. They'll move interstate. They'll try to go to the US. They'll try to go to the UK. So this would be a way to actually hook up with people on the other side of the world at zero cost. So that was the idea. And I thought it was it was a great idea. And, I'm probably making, it's a much deeper idea now. It does many, 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 many things, Vamper. And that audience that we originally spoke to, musicians, well, of course, then we got approached by, photographers and video makers, and they wanted to know if there'd be a category for them so people could connect to them. So, this is a massive network these days, Vamper. You would, without a doubt, be the number one kind of social network for musicians in the world. So
That's incredible.
And it is incredible. And so Josh and I did that, and then we had a nice little exit, and, Josh is now the CEO of Vinyl over here, which is Vamper's part of that, and that's got Jackster in it and a few other things, and a vinyl distribution company. So, yeah, so that was a great thing. Look, it just continued my love of music and opportunity too, I just thought there was a brilliant idea. Just as I actually wanted to make sure there was a distribution model for live music back in the day with Sound Halo, this was something really, really fundamental. I want to start playing music. I find the person that I should be playing music with. I'm a 16-year-old. I don't want a 70-year-old dude turning up to my jam. I want my tribe. I want my punk brothers. It wasn't me. I wasn't a punk guy. Anyway.
But I love
that, it was a really good idea.
You're taking something that you've seen within your industry, because I think so many entrepreneurs, and I've done quite a bit of mentoring of entrepreneurs across the journey.
Yeah, you have.
They're always looking for this kind of. I have. I've done a lot of weird things.
You've done a lot of stuff, I tell you. That's good, Kevin. Well, I think, one thing I think, I both have in common is that, and I've got to say, probably everybody you're talking to, certainly the people I hang around with, they're just so multidisciplined.
You're number 10 in terms of interviews for this podcast. Every single person I've spoken to has had the most...
So low down the ranks.
So low down. God. Well, you're a celebrity. It's hard to get a hold of you.
Ah, yeah.
Everyone I've spoken to, who have all been very successful people, were all probably in the naughty category at school.
Yeah.
There's something in that,
by the way, interestingly, how many of them were inner city kids and how many of them had grown up in the country? Do you know?
Oh, that's a good question. So I've got guests from all around the world. Probably.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a really good question.
Regional inner city. I just know that with them, with the band, Mark was a regional guy and I was a regional guy. I know like Dave Graney and Nick Cave and all of us. Like there's so many people in the music industry were from the regions or from coastal towns, and they weren't part of the inner city. And it's funny because you end up playing, like you become an inner city band, but came out, boondocks.
Well, I grew up in Fremantle and we kind of had to entertain ourselves.
Beautiful
so I
place.
wonder if there's something about...
Well, that's probably where I was heading. You just didn't. There weren't a lot of things to do. When you going right back to the question before about playing guitar. If I didn't play guitar, I would have been out there fishing or something like that. Something like that.
Well, I'm so glad you picked up a guitar instead of a fishing rod, Baz, because...
So am I. I was a shit fisher. A shit fisherman. So there you go.